Room to Read started a little bit by happenstance. I never expected to quit Microsoft to become a full-time do-gooder, full-time education person. But in 1998, when I was at my 7-year anniversary with Microsoft, I decided to take a long trip to escape from the day-to-day grind and meetings and email and all that stuff. And a good place to escape really is the Himalayas, because you're just isolated from the day-to-day reality. I went to Nepal to do an 18-day trek in the Annapurna circuit. And at the end of my first day, I met a local headmaster who had a dilapidated little school in the little village of Bahundanda, Nepal. He asked me if I wanted to come do a quick tour, and I thought this would be a cool way to see what's a local school look like. And like many schools in the developing world, it was simultaneously hopeful because 400 kids were showing up, but it was also rather sad that the physical infrastructure was in horrible shape. The classrooms were terribly overcrowded. They couldn't even afford desks. And when the headmaster showed me the library, that was the most depressing part of the visit, because the library was completely devoid of children's books. And I asked the headmaster why, and he said, well, in Nepal, we're too poor to afford education for our kids, but if we don't get them educated, we're going to always remain poor. And that struck me as the cruelest irony that you could look at any 5-year-old or 6-year-old in the eyes and say, literally, you've lost the lottery of life, right? By the very accident of where you were born and where I were born, we got a good education. And it doesn't mean our lives are easy or perfect, but we've been given that opportunity. So these kids didn't have the opportunity. I thought, okay, I can help this headmaster out. He gave me a homework assignment. He said, perhaps, sir, you will someday come back with books. I eagerly agreed. I shook his hand. I said, I'll see you within a year. And I went back a year later with 3,000 donated books on the back of 6 donkeys. Wow. And it was the happiest day the kids had because they'd never seen brightly colored children's books before. So it was kind of like this mosh pit, this like literacy palooza. Kids were stage diving onto the books. Their eyes were bright and their smiles were wide. And it was a happy day for me too, though, because I realized that there was a small amount of effort and a small amount of money would give these kids a chance that their parents never thought their kids would have. And that was the genesis of Room to Read. Really was like, that was good, but let's not stop at one. In a world of 770 million illiterate people, we got to find a way to do a lot more. So that's where I faced the dilemma of, do I keep doing this as a hobby, or do I quit Microsoft and make it a full-time thing that I do 7/24, 365?
Before we go to that piece where you professionalized it, so you said you came back with 7,000 books, you said?
3,000 books, yeah.
Did you buy them yourself? With the donations? How did you, this first year, how did that go along?
It was done really as just a book drive over the internet. It was sending old-fashioned emails out to people. This is actually, before we really even had widespread texting, but sending emails out to friends, asking them to send books to a couple collection points we established with friends in my parents' garage in the state of Colorado in the US. And so many people, when they sent books to us, they wrote us letters. And us being my father and I, because my 73-year-old father had become my unpaid right-hand man. He needed a retirement project. And my mother needed him to have a retirement project. And so many people wrote us letters to say, thank you for doing this, because I've traveled in Nepal and I've seen the poverty and I wanted to do something about it. But just giving money away doesn't solve poverty. Other people said, thanks for doing this, but by the way, I've traveled in Cambodia where the Khmer Rouge burned down the schools and burned the books. Can you bring the program there? So I just realized that so many people got emotionally invested in the idea that if you can give a child in a poor country the access to education that they would not have otherwise had, that is something that people can get excited about because it's a permanent solution to poverty.
Okay, I see. So you're at this point now, 3,000 books, you come back, they love it. So what went through your head then about your career and the choices you faced?
I think leaving that little village of Bahundanda that day was very difficult because the minute I started walking away from that village, I was walking back towards my normal life. So
you hadn't quit your job at that point?
I hadn't. I just taken a week off.
Did you consider it, or was that?
No, it was premature to consider it, but what happened was the minute I saw how much this meant to the kids and their parents and their teachers, and then even other teachers had trekked 4, 5, 6 hours from other remote villages to be there, and they said, we heard there's a man coming with books, and then people would petition, was the word they used. May I petition you to come to our school? Wow. And so the challenge I think I faced going back to Microsoft, where I was living in Beijing, I was director of business development for the Greater China region, which was a very demanding role. I thought about those other headmasters, and I thought about the schools I'd seen in Vietnam, and I thought about having traveled through Cambodia in 1994 post Khmer Rouge. I thought this is a really big potential thing I could go do. to be clear, I didn't make enough money at Microsoft to start a foundation. I had made enough to take a financial risk and start a cash-strapped NGO, but I was going to have to be reliant on public support from the very beginning to really get it scaled up. But the thing I faced really, I think what it came down to for me is I could keep doing this as a hobby. The problem is very simple. Hobbies don't scale. Organizations do.
So, okay, so you're at this point, you decided you want to do this full time, but I think you made a good point. It wasn't also your money, so you need to come up with a system and a model that actually scales, right? So what happened then? What is the scaling then that you managed over the years?
Well, what the Room to Read founding team did from the very beginning was to say, let's create and adopt a project model where anybody anywhere can be connected to a school. It could be in India, it could be in Tanzania, it could be in Vietnam, and know exactly where their money went. Too often with charities, you don't know where the money goes. You don't know if it's being used to get things done or whether it's being used in superfluous or wasteful ways. So the number one thing we said is an adopt a school model where our investors, we don't call them donors. Donor to me sounds too passive. Our investors can get a chance to connect directly with a school. We'll send them photos, we'll send them video, they can go visit it. And that's really, I think, what started to take off. So Marc Andreessen was one of our first investors in Room to Read.
Founder of Netscape, a famous investor now, yeah.
Yeah, which is ironic because I had been part of the group at Microsoft that was, against Netscape and we were competing head to head. But when I showed Marc the model, he just said, it's unbelievable that you can reach all these kids with one simple library that costs in inflation-adjusted dollars, $20,000, enough to actually set up a library serving 400 kids. Yeah. So it's literally, $50 per child served. So we started getting a lot of Silicon Valley money. Paul Haar, who was an early Google employee in the Bay Area, he and his wife Susan got behind it, and Don Valentine from Sequoia Capital and his family underwrote a lot of the early work. Because we just went to a lot of the capitalists and a lot of the tech community to say this model means a little bit of money can go a long ways, and it's a chance. Like I would never have enough money to endow a building at Northwestern University, but gosh, you can actually set up a program and bring a literacy program and a library program to a rural village for a relatively small amount of money. So that was the first part of the model. The second part was really having a very low overhead model so we could prove that the money was not getting spent on overhead, but it was going directly to the program. So we deploy about 84 cents on the dollar directly to programs. Where Charity Navigator, our rating agency, gives us 4 stars. We've had that for 10 plus years. And we take the financial efficiency of it very, very seriously.
Great. Fantastic. So talk a bit about the impact, right? Because obviously for us, we have access to books, right? But talk a bit about what it means for somebody living there to have access to books. What does this mean? What is the impact of the trajectory of their lives?
Yeah, so for us, we started from very, very humble beginnings, and that first little library in Bahundanda, Nepal was opened in 1999. I was in India 2 weeks ago, and we actually celebrated the 20,000th community that Room to Read has reached with our literacy programs and our library programs. So it's scaled way beyond my wildest dreams, where we've launched now in 14 countries around the world, primarily in Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. And a really big part of our model is that our leadership team wants to run the organization like a business. In the early years, I said the heart of Mother Teresa, the scalability of Starbucks. And that's really been our model from the very beginning. A lot of our leadership team are what I call corporate refugees. They've worked for a decade plus in the for-profit sector. They've learned to run businesses. They've learned to scale businesses. But a lot of our leadership team, they're ex-Goldman Sachs, they're ex-Credit Suisse, they're ex-Chiron. I'm not the only ex-Microsoft person ever being employed. They're ex-Deloitte. And a lot of our leadership is really built around the idea that if you can run this like a business and scale it, and we have to scale because Google has a classic example of an organization that sees opportunity and scale. We don't think the line should stop at the nonprofit. We think nonprofit should also scale as quickly. Our moonshot is 770 million people are illiterate, over 200 million kids in the developing world don't go to school every day, and 2/3 of those are girls and women. So if we could solve those 3 problems in our lifetime, the effect on the world would be just astronomical.
So if I imagine I'm maybe a girl in one of those villages, so what does it mean now for me that I have those books? I guess they have teachers, right? So it's material in a concept. Talk a bit about the context. how does this now, play a role in their lives, right? I mean, I guess there's still more context around it for them to be useful, the books.
Yeah, so our goal is that every community that we work in, on our literacy program, for example, the literacy program is, of course, open to both boys and girls. Yeah. It's important, we think, that number one, they have trained teachers and trained librarians, so that's a big part of what Room to Read does, because your school is only going to be as good as the adults you have running it. We have community co-investment, so the communities are required to put resources in. Quite often it's sweat equity, it's labor, to prove they value it. The Ministry of Education is required.
What would they do? Like, for example, if you say sweat labor, what would
so I was in Sri Lanka at one of our communities we work in, and parents had proudly told me that they had come and painted both the inside and the outside walls of the library. That one parent told me that he had gone out and saved money to buy a 100-pound bag of cement as his contribution to building this library building. Things like that where, our investor probably made a little bit less effort to write a large check. They made a lot of effort to earn the money. But the effort put in by these communities is absolutely incredible.
So you create leverage and buy-in, it really multiplies actually the impact.
Exactly. It multiplies it, and it also, I think, makes the programs much more sustainable. Because if we just send in a bunch of well-meaning volunteers to do a project and then those volunteers leave, the community doesn't feel that sense of ownership or engagement. So what we've always been all about is make sure that the communities feel engaged enough and that they value the programs enough that they will co-invest, and then the Ministry of Education also co-invests in each project. So when Room to Read brings our literacy program to a village, we require the Ministry of Education to provide the teachers and the librarians and to pay their ongoing salary. Again, it's just a way to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for long-term success by having a tripartite agreement: Room to Read, local community, Ministry of Education.
It's fascinating to hear how you actually started with, in a sense, a very simple idea, right? Bringing books, but then you managed to scale a lot of, it's almost like a business model, right?
Yes.
That you scale. It's not a business, it's a non-profit, but it's still a model, right? That you had to develop and refine and find a product market fit for it and scale it out. I mean, it's a very professional approach. Could be one of the secrets maybe of scaling this, that it's run by professionals?
I think that's a really key thing. In our case, we've also layered in, and we have great support on this from the Gates Foundation, from Bill and Melinda's Foundation, that we've also set up a research monitoring and evaluation arm. Because we don't want to just put in a literacy program or put in a long-term education program for girls and hope it works, right? The whole idea that, in God we trust, all others bring data. We do that. We measure reading scores. I was in India 2 weeks ago and saw the second graders in our schools were reading at 37 words per minute, whereas in the average government school that we're not engaged in, that number is 14 words per minute. Wow. We track comprehension levels. We track how many books are being taken out of the libraries. We track how many of the girls in our girls' education program are attending our life skills courses, how many of them are bringing their parents along so their parents feel engaged. So we're very, very... we're kind of data-driven geeks at Room to Read, and I think that data collection and that evidence-based learning permeates everything we do, so we can find out where are we strong, and let's replicate that and share it out across all the countries we're working in. But let's also find out and admit where we're not doing so well, and then go try to figure out, well, what's keeping those numbers from being as good as we want them to be, and how does the program design then need to evolve so that those numbers get better over time.
Fascinating. Do you have examples of maybe something that didn't work and then you stopped it, and then maybe something that surprised and worked better than you ever thought based on the data?
Yeah, I once asked that question to Dr. Corey Heyman, who at the time was our director of programs, one of the most brilliant people I know, and every time he talks to me, I feel like I get smarter. And I asked him that once. I said, well, give me an example of this. So it's actually Corey's example, but he was telling me in our early days in Zambia, where 80% plus of girls don't make it past grade 6, we had all these girls in our program. And the dropout rate wasn't ridiculously high, but it was high enough compared to other countries where we said, let's go study why are girls dropping out of our program in grade 7 or grade 8 or grade 9. And so they did a survey, and they basically tried to find out what reasons. 2 of the top 3 reasons girls were dropping out of school were pregnancy and teenage marriage. And the more they studied that, the local team studied that, the more they realized that bringing the girls into the program at age 12 or 13 might be too late. The bad habits may have already been formed. So they made a decision to move the entry age into the program up by 2 to 3 years so the girls would come in earlier and be able to take part in our life skills programs, which teach things like the benefits of delaying marriage, contraception, their rights over their body, things like that. In addition to the academics, we're also teaching the girls the life skills they'll need to negotiate key decisions they'll have to make. A lot of it's done in partnership with the tech community, so Goldman Sachs has underwritten a program to teach entrepreneurship. The MetLife Foundation is underwriting a program to teach the girls financial literacy, and that's a key part of Room to Read's success is partnership with the corporate world. We're very pro-capitalist. Our belief is that if we can partner with the world's leading firm, we can just get a lot more done in partnership and get a lot more done working together.
It's fascinating to see how you scaled this really from this core idea and then almost like, yeah, like you said, it's almost life coaching that you offer. Really, you change, you know, deeply ingrained habits, I guess, and notions. You mentioned the scale, and if I in the preparation I looked at some of the numbers, it's mind blowing. So talk about where you stand today and how big this whole thing has become.
Yeah, it's the numbers are really great. They've got to get higher. You know, you got to stay humble. You got to stay hungry. We were happy with where we are, but we're well aware that there's tens of millions of kids who have never heard of Room to Read, and every day we lose is the day we can't get back. So when I tell our results, I try to also say with humility, like we got a long, long ways to go. But 2 weeks ago we were in India. We celebrated a couple of milestones. One is over 50,000 young women have taken part in, are enrolled in, or have graduated from our long-term girls education program. The number is actually 54,000. It's pretty amazing. Every time we raise 300 Swiss francs, one more girl can be in the program for 1 more year. So it's a very inexpensive model of change. We celebrated our 20,000th community reached by our literacy and our library programs. That means over 18 million books in the hands of kids. That means right now, by the end of 2017, we should have about 12.5 million students in 15 countries benefiting from our programs. And that number will go to at least 15 million by 2020. But if I was a betting man, I bet we'll be even higher than that. The official number is 15 million, but I have faith we're gonna get to reach even more kids than that.
And then I saw your revenue numbers are impressive. Like, what's the total revenues?
Revenues, we bring in about 50 million US a year, and that's pure philanthropic capital. Yeah, wow. 50 million. Yeah. And a lot of it is done through that project adoption model, where people will say, well, gosh, we had a family in Aspen, Colorado, whose daughter was getting married. And as a wedding gift, they funded a new school literacy program in Cambodia and then sent their daughter Lauren and her husband Matt on a surprise trip to go actually see it and be there for the unveiling. And so while we do raise a lot of money, I think the important thing to recognize is a lot of it is very bottoms up. So even things like Giving Week at Google, people have been super supportive of us. And as big as we get, we try to always remind ourselves that even one person can make a difference. And that's why I think the girls' education program has grown as much as it has, because a lot of that money is coming from people who literally just say, well, I don't have a huge amount, but if I give $900 US, 3 girls go to school for a year. We're happy with where we are, but I keep stressing the fact that we're competing against forces out there that are fairly nefarious. I mean, everything from poverty to apathy to misogyny to bigger things like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, who want to reach kids with negativity in their lives. And I believe that education is the ultimate positive thing. So it's what drives us and drives our entire board and our leadership team and our frontline staff to keep working hard to say, don't ever get complacent. We got to reach every kid who needs us, and until we've done that, there's no resting. Yeah,
fascinating. When I did the research, I looked a bit on your website, and you have, I think, a 2020 plan, 25-year plan. So you really run this like a business, like Google or a startup, you know, that is ambitious and spells out the vision and the strategy. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. And part of that is also admitting where you're weak, because it's one thing to be transparent when you're talking about all the wonderful things you're doing and all the successes you've had. But we also have to really, I think, analyze and go collect data to say, where can we get better? And so we learned in 2004, you and I were talking earlier about our local language publishing initiative. In 2004, we did a study of students who were using our libraries to ask them what would cause you to use the libraries more often. Mm-hmm. And we gave them multiple choice options. They could check as many boxes as they want, open at nights, open on weekends, whatever it would be. But the number one answer kids gave us, 54% wanted more books in their mother tongue, in this case Nepalese and Vietnamese, which sounds obvious. Of course kids want books in their mother tongue. Yeah. But the issue is that the for-profit publishers don't publish books in languages spoken by poor people.
Because it's not an interesting business.
Yeah, there's no margin there. And I mean, when I was at Microsoft, we would localize all the software first into French, German, the language spoken by wealthy people, and then you might eventually get to Lao or Uzbek or Setswana, or you may never get there. Yeah, yeah. Kids' books is even worse because kids' books don't have the same scale economy of what software has, how quickly software can spread. Mm-hmm. So the problem that we face is that there's really not like a Dr. Seuss or a Tintin in these poor countries. So we decided to basically start training local authors and local artists to be the first in their generation to publish children's literature. And what we did starting in 2004 in Nepal is we found local authors and local artists. We asked them to create original content so that kids would see books that were relevant to them. So the kids in Cambodia would see houses on stilts, and the kids in Nepal would see yaks and mountains and things like that. And we started small. We started with 10 titles in Nepal in 2004. But I'm proud to say we've now created over 1,300 original titles. 99% of them are local authors and local artists and local editors. We print locally to try to help create employment and create opportunities, economic opportunities for those authors and artists to keep having income from publishing. And we were given the UNESCO Confucius Prize for Literacy, recognizing that we weren't just taking books like Pippi Longstocking or Heidi and translating them into Khmer, and then the kids in Cambodia are
create
confused.
Something locally, right? Like
create something locally that kids can relate to. And if people go to roomtoread.org, one of the fun things about our website is actually going and seeing the photographs of the books that kids are actually reading in our libraries and our schools.
And you even said, I think, I read somewhere, you're the biggest publisher, book publisher in the world. Is this true? Or one of the biggest?
Well, it's a joke I made that we're the biggest children's publisher you've never heard of. Like many of my jokes, it's not that funny. But it's because
we're not really funny.
But we publish in languages that our kids don't speak. In Switzerland or in Hong Kong where I live, we're publishing in Zulu, Setswana, Xhosa, Sinhalese, Tamil, Lao. We're launching, we've done a couple new languages in the last couple of years. We've added in Swahili, which is a person who spent a lot of time in East Africa I'm very excited about. But what I'm most proud about with that is, again, it's not well-meaning foreigners coming in with a solution. In Tanzania, those books in Swahili have Tanzanian authors and Tanzanian artists behind them, and I got to tell you, they're the proudest people in the world, because when you have a really motivated 25, 26-year-old who realizes that in their brain and in their talent lies a possible solution to poverty in their country, they're some of the most motivated people I've ever met.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Wow, that's so inspiring. So I guess I don't even have to ask you this question, but did you ever regret leaving Microsoft then?
The only thing I regret is that I used to have this magic credit card where I never saw the bill, and I could just spend money and not have to care. I just went to an accountant somewhere. But no, I mean, I think, look, there's sacrifices involved for anybody who does this social sector for a living.
Did you take personally?
Well, I think financially. I worked for no salary for 3 years. Room to Read issues stock options and only pay off karmically in the afterlife. I mean, you give up. I mean, I'm 53 years old and I'm still renting. I don't own a home. I don't know that I ever will own a home. Yeah. That's a very small sacrifice to make, though, compared to the parents I've met where they literally will eat one meal a day and save that extra money to be able to buy their child clothing or medicine. So the sacrifices we make are very, very minor. Do I regret it? Not at all. Some of the happiest days of my life have been those days when I'm in villages that Room to Read helps, and not just meeting the students, which is fun, but also meeting that grandmother who says, I can die now, that I know my granddaughter is going to get through school. Meeting that farmer in Nepal who had brought a 100-pound bag of grain to the community celebration because they were doing a grain drive where any farmer could donate grain that would be sold off, and that money would be used to help improve the school. The stories I've gotten to hear, and if people have not read my first book, there's a lot of stories. The book was titled Leaving Microsoft to Change the World, which is kind of, I know, a grandiose title, but it just tells the story.
True.
Yeah, it just tells the story, I think, about how any of us who are committed and passionate about education can just make a humongous difference. And to me, that's the ultimate question in life is, what's your legacy going to be? When you're 70 or 75 or 80 and you're sitting there in your rocking chair looking back on your life and you're going to ask, what did I do? What did I create? And I think that I would never judge anybody by their own legacy, but I do look at myself in the mirror and ask, what's my legacy and what's this organization's legacy going to be? And I damn well want that legacy to be as huge and as impactful and as long-lasting as possible. And if we don't do that, I'll just consider it to be completely suboptimal, because this is the most important issue in the world. Education for the poorest of the poor.
Two questions about this conviction part, because it's fascinating and really comes through how much it means to you. In that moment, you know, when you came back with the books and you got that feedback, and then when you decided to leave Microsoft, how clear was that for you to leave? Did you have doubts? I'm sure you had some doubts. Was it like 90-10, 80-20, was it 50-50? First question. Second question, throughout the years, did you ever doubt it, the decision? I'm sure there were challenges on the way. Mm-hmm. So how did you deal with those doubts, if you had any?
Well, I think leaving Microsoft, yes, it was very intimidating for me. I remember going into my boss's office one day, and I'd been working at my Courage for a couple of days, and it was 8:30 in the morning, and I walked into his office, and I said, I'm going to tell you something you don't want to hear, and I'm going to leave for the day, and then you can respond tomorrow. And he looked at me, he's like I was crazy. You know, I go, I quit. This doesn't work for me anymore. And he said, but, and I said, no, we're not talking about this today. I'm leaving for the day. And I literally went out the building and went to a little tea shop in Beijing and pulled out my journal and I wrote, like, holy crap, I did it. Like, I threw myself out of the airplane. Like, now I gotta hope the parachute deploys. It was nerve-wracking in a sense because I think in the Western world, so much of what we, so much of the way people perceive us is what we do for a job. The first thing is when I ask you to a dinner party,
right? Yeah.
Right. What do you do? Exactly. And I was going from saying Microsoft, Greater China, blah, 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 to being like, I deliver books in the back of yaks in rural Himalayan villages. It was an instant loss of status. Yeah. That was big, but then the second part of your question was about...
Over the years, was it like...
The regret,
yeah.
did I
did
have
you ever
any
look
moments
back?
of doubt?
Exactly.
Look, I think 2000 was a horrible time to launch a charity. The tech bubble burst, my own savings went way down, people had reasons not to give. Then in America, where we were based, 9/11 hit. Sure. In 2001, and America became this much more xenophobic place then. And it was rough the first couple of years. I mean, our first year, I think we raised $35,000. Our second year, we raised about $165,000. And although a little bit of money goes a long way, that's way too little. So the frustration was, and I remember being with our founding team, and I wrote on our whiteboard, I wrote TBIT. And those letters stood for too big to ignore. I said, one day we just got to keep grinding this out, school by school, village by village, girl scholar by girl scholar, and one day our numbers will be big enough that the world will not be able to ignore us.
And when was that day?
That was 2001, 2002, during the very early years. But we're very fortunate that not only did Silicon Valley and a lot of the tech community get behind us, but also Goldman Sachs and Credit Suisse and a lot of the banking community and a lot of the finance community got behind us, because we went to the finance community and the banking community and said, here's the ROI. When you put $300 in and a girl goes to school for a year, her eventual wages will increase by 20% per additional year of schooling. So give a girl 6 additional years of schooling, her eventual wages will double or triple. Yeah. When a woman makes an extra dollar in the developing world, she tends to spend 90% of it on the family. Women are more enlightened than we men are about how we spend the marginal dollar. They spend it on food, shelter, clothing, education, medicine. Yeah. So the ROI, I think, was really, really clear to say if you can actually put, let's say, $1,800 in and a girl goes to school for 6 additional years and is the first in her family to ever finish secondary school. Don Valentine, the founder of Sequoia Capital, when I explained it to him, he said this is the biggest no-brainer in philanthropy. And his daughter Hillary had been involved, but she said, if you got to pitch my dad, and if my dad agrees, then you're going to get the family behind it in a bigger way. And Don Valentine, when I published my second book, he put a blurb on it for me. And here's a guy, Sequoia, they've invested in everything. And he wrote, Room to Read is the best long-term investment I've ever made. And that was very humbling.
So actually, in a sense, you had success quite early on, in a sense, right? The validation and the scaling moment came quite early, so it's congrats. Yeah.
It did, but I think for our founding team, we looked at it and it just was like, it was just never going to be enough because you keep thinking about all the villages you haven't reached.
Of course, absolutely.
So we did start to reach some significant scale, but we opened our 5,000th library in 2007. And that was our first 7 years. And then we got an invitation from the Clinton Global Initiative to come up with a big, hairy, audacious goal. So we basically, and Aaron, my co-founder, had we were like, let's go from 5,000 to 10,000 and do that in 3 years. And so we did our first capital campaign and got to that. And now we're at 20,000 communities impacted. But I'm looking forward to the day I can tell you there's 100,000 communities.
Talk about the future, actually. Where is this going to be in 5 years and 10 years? What are your plans?
Well, the most immediate thing for us is that we're launching it. We're just right now, I'm heading off from Zurich. I'll be going to Amman. We're launching Room to Read in Jordan, which we're very, very excited about because Jordan's been a country that's been very accepting of refugees, certainly more so than My own homeland, the United States, has not been as welcoming to Syrian refugees. Over 2 million refugees in Jordan. It's put an incredible strain on the school system there. So with support from the Dubai Cares Foundation, Dubai Cares has a program called Reading Nation. We're launching our first Arabic language children's book publishing program. We're doing our first Arabic language early readers. These are mostly Jordanian and some Syrians involved with doing this next generation of books. We're doing 20 original titles, 30,000 copies of each book. Every primary school in the entire country, at the invitation of the Jordanian ministry, will now have these books. And for us, it's our 25th language. We also are looking potentially at bringing the program into Lebanon. Lebanon has also a huge number of refugees. If you look out 5 years, 10 years, you know, by the end of this year, we're going to have reached about 12.5 million children. If you look out 10 years, let's just say if we could go from reaching about 1 million students a year today to reaching 2 million students a year, and then you did that over a decade, you would add 20 million additional students and you'd be at well over 30 million. Could we do that? I know our team is good enough they could do that. The gating question becomes the funding. Can you get enough funding coming in so that those teams are well resourced? Because we do not want to be in the business of saying no. If a government says to us, and this happens in India, where 35% of the world's illiterate people live in India. And my challenge to the Indian tech community and business community is, you're doing really, really well. But don't forget that there's tens of millions of our little brothers and sisters out there who are not getting educated. And I think for us, the path to scale, a lot of that can pass through India. If we could just completely blow out our work in India, there's no shortage of kids whose lives could be changed. And so I look forward. We've already reached, I was in India 2 weeks ago, and our local team, Swarov, our country director, who's amazing, told me that we've already reached over 3 million students in India. But I would love to see the day we're at 10 million, 15 million, 20 million in India, because that in and of itself, so much of the future can be changed for India, but we've got to reach those kids who otherwise are overlooked.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned tech already a couple of times, investors, the tech community. What role does tech actually play in your model in the initiative?
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways for a group like Room to Read to look at tech. Number one is, what does tech enable us to do just in terms of running efficient operations? What does tech allow us to do in keeping a global workforce of 1,500 volunteers across 20 plus countries, 15,000 volunteers? How do we stay connected? And so we have great partnerships. Lenovo gives us free ThinkPads to keep our overhead low. Salesforce has given us free storage from the very beginning. Mark Benioff is totally walking the walk when he talks about being a good corporate citizen. Then there's how do you use technology and actually deploying the education programs. And we've been a little bit loath to go too far, too fast in that direction, because there's an old saying of putting the cart in front of the horse. And I think until a child achieves early grade literacy, can read at 40 words plus per minute, can comprehend what they're reading, technology can't do a lot of good for them. Yeah, they can play games, but if you give an illiterate child a tablet that doesn't have any local language content on it, it's just not going to do that much good. What those kids need more is trained teachers. They need local language books. Books can be maligned. I think books are wonderful. Books are a single-purpose device. There's nothing beeping at you or tweeting at you or telling you there's a Facebook update that so-and-so posted their daughter's prom pictures and it distracts you from reading.
It's deeper, longer, right? It's a longer commitment, yeah.
Yeah, you get totally engaged on it.
So thank you so much. We heard a lot of great stuff. We actually have a little surprise now. We have actually a video of a person that went through your program, and actually it's a fascinating human story about how much of a difference you made for that person. So why don't we quickly look at a video.
Tôi là Saluom. Anhខ្ញុំមានអាយុ24ឆ្នាំមានស្រុកកំណើតនៅក្នុងភូមិស្វាយឃុំសសរស្ដំស្រុកពួកខេត្តសៀមរាបជីវិតរបស់ខ្ញុំកាលពីថ្នាក់ទី1ដល់ថ្នាក់ទី6ខ្ញុំគ្រាន់តែដឹងថារៀនគឺដើម្បីតែរៀនទេខ្ញុំមិនដឹងថាខ្ញុំគួរតែរៀនឲ្យធ្វើអីទៀតបន្តទៀតទេដោយសារនៅក្នុងគ្រួសាររបស់ខ្ញុំពិបាកខ្លាំងនិយាយខ្លីគឺក្រហ៎បងដល់ពេលចោះខ្ញុំអត់មាននឹកគិតចិត្តថាចង់ទៅរៀនបន្តទៀតទេគ្រាន់តែថា ចិត្តរបស់ខ្ញុំពេលនោះគឺរៀនតែចេះតែអានអក្សរសិនឲ្យតែមើលដាច់ទៅណាកុំវែងទៅបានហើយអត់ចង់ខ្វល់រឿងរៀនបន្តទៅទៀតទេ
ខ្លះទៅក៏មិនអូគេដូចតែគ្នាវាយ៉ាប់ទៅក៏បានតែថ្នាក់ទី5ទី6ទៅក៏ឈប់កូនក៏បញ្ជូនទៅថៃទៅអុយទៅក៏ខានរៀនគ្នាមិនសូវងាយបានរៀនជឿប
រៀនដល់ថ្នាក់ទី3ដោយសារនៅសាលាដែលនៅជិតផ្ទះខ្ញុំហ្នឹងវាគ្រូគាត់អត់សូវរៀនបានជាប់លើប់ទៅពេលចោះម៉ែខ្ញុំក៏ដូរសាលាឲ្យមករៀននៅបឋមសិក្សាសស្ដំពេលខ្ញុំមកបានមករៀននៅសាលាសស្ដំចាប់ដើមឃើញដោយសារសាលានៅជិតទីប្រជុំជនដល់ពេលចោះអ្នកនៅជុំវិញនេះភាគច្រើនគឺសិតតែអ្នករៀនធ្វើខ្ញុំមានចិត្តចង់រៀនកាន់តែខ្លាំងទៀតពេលខ្ញុំមកដូចថាឃើញគេឃើញឯងទៅចង់រៀនទៀតចាប់ដើមដោះគំនិតថាខំរៀននៅកាន់តែប្រកែកាលហ្នឹងធ្វើឲ្យខ្ញុំដោះគំនិតកាន់តែចង់រៀនទៅទៀតប៉ុន្តែរហូតមកដល់ចុងថ្នាក់ទី6គ្រួសាររបស់ខ្ញុំពុកនិងម៉ែរបស់ខ្ញុំគាត់ជួបគ្រោះថ្នាក់ចរាចរណ៍
ទៅដឹកអស់នេះទៅរកក្រាក់មកធ្វើរូងមឿនទៅក៏ត្រឡប់គូយួនកាលនោះត្រឡប់ទៅវាថាធ្លាយពោះថាមិនរស់បើកាលនោះដេកពេទ្យបានមក6ថ្ងៃមកវិញមកចតគ្រូខ្មែរទៅជីអស់ឡើងសំណាំក្រឿនហ្នឹងកាលនោះអស់ឡើង1លានកន្លះតែមានអ៊ុយសោះមានគូ2លក់គូនោះមើលជំងឺ
ខ្ញុំដឹងថាខ្ញុំប្រហែលជាបានរៀនទៀតទេព្រោះដោយសារពុកម៉ែខ្ញុំគាត់ក្រខ្លាំងហើយណាមួយគាត់ឈឺទៀតរត់តែចាប់ទៅឆ្ងាយទៀតអីប៉ុន្តែពេលចុងថ្នាក់ទី6ហ្នឹងខាងអង្គការរួមទ្រីននឹងបានផ្ដល់ដំណឹងទៅខាងសាលាថាមានរើសសិស្សកុមារីដើម្បីរៀនបន្តទៀតពេលចុះគ្រូខ្ញុំគាត់ឲ្យខ្ញុំនេះបំពេញហ្វមអាហារូបករណ៍ដល់ពេលខ្ញុំបានបំពេញទម្រង់បែបបត់ទៅខ្ញុំបានជាប់ជាសិស្សអាហារូបករណ៍រួមទ្រីន
អង្គការគេជួយយើងរៀនបានខំរៀនបានចេះបានកូនសិស្សចេះដេញបានចេះបានយើងទៅណាក៏ធ្វើការអង្គីបានធ្វើការវាស្រួលរកការងារ
ចំទី12គេឲ្យអំពេញទម្រង់បែបបត់ដើម្បីសុំអាហារូបករណ៍នៅសាលាខ្ញុំគិតថាខ្ញុំដាក់ទៅបំពេញបើសិនជាខ្ញុំជាប់ទៅបំពេញស្រួលឲ្យខ្ញុំឲ្យទៅរៀនទៀតក៏មិនដឹង
ដែលវាទៅឯនោះទៅក៏ដាក់ពាក្យទៅថាជាអាហារូបករណ៍បងបើតែចាស់ក៏ទៅនោះ
តាមរយៈវគ្គបណ្ដុះបណ្ដាលផ្សេងដែលខ្ញុំទទួលបានពីរួមទ្រីដូចជារបៀបនៃការធ្វើឲ្យយើងមានភាពជោគជ័យរបៀបការរៀបចំ plan វគ្គបណ្ដុះបណ្ដាលទាំងអស់នោះវាជួយខ្ញុំច្រើនធ្វើឲ្យខ្ញុំមានអារម្មណ៍ថាខ្លួនឯងមានភាពឯករាជ្យជាងមុនចេះចូលសង្គមចេះដើរទៅណាមកណាកាលមុនពេលដែលខ្ញុំចង់មកសៀមរាបមកអីខ្ញុំមិនដាច់ហ៊ានមកម្នាក់ឯងទេហើយក៏មិនដឹងថាសៀមរាបបែបមុខតាណាដែរប៉ុន្តែសប្តាហ៍ថ្ងៃឲ្យតែកន្លែងណាដែលមាននៅក្នុង Google គឺខ្ញុំអត់ខ្លាចទេឲ្យតែឆែក Google ឃើញគឺខ្ញុំទៅហើយតើតើនឹងរឿងសង្គមវិញអ្នកជិតខាងកាលពីមុនខ្ញុំដើរទៅអត់ដែលមានណាខ្វល់ទេប៉ុន្តែរាល់ថ្ងៃដើមភូមិនៅចុងភូមិហ្នឹងតែគេមានគេស្គាល់ហើយហៅឲ្យដឹងថាខ្ញុំនឹងកូនណាគេទៀតតាមរយៈវគ្គបណ្ដុះបណ្ដាលផ្សេងៗមករួមទ្រីតខ្ញុំរៀនបានច្រើនហើយខ្ញុំគិតថាវាមានឥទ្ធិពលខ្លាំងសម្រាប់ជីវិតរបស់ខ្ញុំគិតថាជីវិតរបស់ខ្ញុំមានការផ្លាស់ប្ដូររហូតមកដល់បច្ចុប្បន្ននេះគឺតាមរយៈការអប់រំហើយខ្ញុំគិតថាការអប់រំរបស់ខ្ញុំបានចប់សពគ្រប់គឺដោយសារតែអង្គការរួមទ្រីតខ្ញុំគិតថាវាសំខាន់បំផុតសម្រាប់ជីវិតរបស់ខ្ញុំ
Wonderful, and I love the reference to Google Maps because I worked on Google Maps for 7 years. So a second part, so this was a wonderful, touching story of Saluom out of Cambodia. And a second part of the surprise, we actually have Saluom with us today here. So I would love to welcome her on stage with us. It's just a pleasure that you... Yes, hello. Thank you so much for coming. It's wonderful that you join us here. Saluom, tell us a little bit more how this initiative, Room to Read, impacted your life.
The first thing I would like to say about good afternoon to everyone coming here. If you ask me what is the influence of Room to Read on my life, I think that there are many things that it impacts on my life. But the first one, I would like to introduce myself to all of you. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Saluom Lak. I'm from Siem Reap province of Cambodia. I have been graduated from high school in 2013, and I also just graduated from the Royal University of Phnom Penh with my major in sociology. And I'm currently now at I'm a trainee teacher at National Institute of Education. That it is the best school in Cambodia. Yeah. Okay. I also passed an exam to be a high school teacher that only 3 of 75 students from Siem Reap province can pass. I'm so proud of this result. Yeah. Yes. My parents are very happy that they could not sleep that night when the result was out. Yeah. It's not only because I got a position as a high school teacher, but also because I am the first one in my family to study at the university, and also I am the first in my village to become a qualified high school teacher. Yeah. I grew up in the family of 8. And my family are my parents are farmers, and our family has always living in the difficult situation. But I believe that I be able to provide my family with a decent living in the future through my education. Okay.
Perfect. When have you first met both of you?
Today. Today. It's our first time meeting, and actually you were also saying that you're the first person from your village to ever travel to Europe.
Yeah, I'm the first person that traveling to Europe, and the first person that can travel by the airplane. It is many experience for me.
And it's always one of the highlights for me, because when I meet our graduates, you know, quite often when you see some of these young women entering the program in grade 6 or grade 7, they're not very confident, they're afraid of their future. And one of the things that's really critical to Room to Read success of our girls' education program is it's not an academic scholarship. Yes, we're doing things like paying school fees and exam fees for those who can't afford it, but the most important parts of the program are really what we surround the girls with, that they have social mobilizers, strong local women who check in on them on a regular basis. We have after-school tutoring available, so if they need help on their math exam or their science exam, they have tutoring. And then we have the life skills courses, which I mentioned earlier, which teach these young women the skills they'll need to negotiate those key life decisions. And obviously in Saluom's case, that even involves learning about Google Maps and being able to figure out how to use Google Maps. So that's a win-win for the world.
That makes me personally happy. Thank you so much for that. It's wonderful. Well, thank you so much both for coming. Such an inspiring story. Saluom, thank you so much, and really congrats, and you can be so proud of what you achieved. And John, same for you. You can be incredibly proud of what you kicked off here and what you have done to improve the world. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.